I'm Charlie Bright of Gold Derby, and today I'm speaking with Leslie Shatz, the sound designer for the Todd Haynes documentary, The Velvet Underground, about how the influential band rose to prominence in the late 60s and 70s. First question I wanted to ask you was, did you have a pre-existing relationship with the music of The Velvet Underground prior to working on this documentary?
It's funny because I started in rock and roll. I mixed PA for front of the house for the Whiskey Go-Go in California. And, I knew a lot about all the West Coast bands and the English bands, but the Velvet Underground really was never on my radar. I mean, they were a little scary for me, talking about heroin and the overtones of homosexuality. And so I mean, I knew their hits from the radio, but I wasn't like a huge fan.
Were those it's interesting you mentioned the tones of about the queer tones of music. Was that even evident back then when you were first hearing them?
Yeah, I know. It's kind of funny because it's not really overt, but you just knew like there was some, like what he's saying, waiting for the man. Like I didn't really know what he was going to be doing with the man. I mean, look, I was a teenager then, I think. And so it was just, I mean, I was curious, but I was like a little afraid, like the whole thing with heroin back then, and I guess still now, but back then it was like heroin and you will die. Like don't even, I mean, I guess it's no different now, but just even getting close to that subject was scary for me. And it also tied into New York. I'd never been to New York. I grew up in LA. I was never, I was 18 or 19 the first time I went to New York, and people said, okay, so when you go to New York, you're going to get mugged. People are going to rob you. So just forget about it. Like if you go in the subway, you'll get killed probably. And I think I associated that Velvet Underground with all that kind of danger. And then when I got old enough to really be curious, that was very much more interesting to me.
So this is another collaboration that you've done with Todd Haynes. You've been working with Todd's for almost 2 decades now. I was curious as to how did that working relationship come about?
I mean, I was really lucky. I did Far From Heaven was the first film that I did with him. I guess maybe it was 20 years ago. And he just didn't have somebody. And I work a lot with Gus Van Sant. I'd already been working with Gus a lot, and they both lived in Portland at the time. And I think he just called Gus and said, who do you like? And he mentioned my name, and I talked to Todd, and then we got started. And I think Todd grew up in LA also. I think we have a similar background in certain ways, and we can relate to each other. And he's very he loves sound, and he's really very meticulous with his sound work, with every aspect of the film. And so that's something that I really respond to, because it makes you bring your A game. You can't just like sit around and kind of be lazy. You have to really be on, and that's exciting.
Are those reasons why you think the relationship between you two on a professional level, I'm guessing also on a personal level, has endured for so long?
Yeah, I think so. Like I never know, I don't want to ask like, how am I doing so far? Am I doing okay? But I think like after Wonderstruck, we did a lot of, different things with the sound, although, it wasn't the normal things that people do for deaf sounds. But after, like a year afterwards, Todd said, oh my God, those tones that you put in for the deaf moments in Wonderstruck, those were just amazing. And so that made me feel really good. Like, of course, at the end of every job, everybody's like, oh, great job, whatever. But the fact that he remembered that and singled it out made me feel like, we're vibing on a certain wavelength that, words are only, a partial substitute for. And I think maybe that this was a good example of that, because he said, I want the sounds to be something that aren't supposed to be there. Aside from all of the music in the film, there's sound design, and sometimes subtle, sometimes not so subtle. But anytime I did anything that was expected, that you would expect, he completely dismissed it and rejected it, said, no, it's got to be something that you don't expect. So like that puts you into like kind of like, okay, then what is that? But you know, you know, it was very exciting to try and find that. And when I did find it, we were on a really great wavelength. And I think it took a while, but by the time we got to the end of it, I think Todd really felt like we'd created something special. And that's makes me happy.
So what were some of the challenges in dealing with the audio from the archival footage as opposed to the audio from the interviews that were conducted for the film?
Well, fortunately, we weren't trying to make the archival footage sound modern. We wanted to sound period. And there's really only one scene, I think, that's subtitled, where maybe two, the scene in the factory where everybody's laying around, and then the phone call at the end. But I guess the music was really more of a challenge. You know, people think, oh, wow, it's music film. You're going to get all these master tapes and, you know, it's all going to be like really cool and great. But in fact, you know, most of the stuff was recorded in mono. And, you know, Todd didn't want to do like some fake thing. You know, he wanted to preserve the feeling. And a lot of it was, you know, the recordings were distorted and you didn't want to change that either. So the idea is, what should I do to make it better without making it better? You know, without putting, you know, this coat of shiny paint on it. And then all of a sudden people are going, yeah, but that's not really the Velvet Underground. So that took a while to figure out. And, you know, Todd, it was a team effort with Todd and with Fonz and Adam. But I think we got there eventually. A lot of it had to do with the spatialization that I was trying to work with, where we took the music and put it everywhere. Because it wasn't stereo, we couldn't go left, right, but we took the source of sound and made it come from many speakers at the same time. So in fact, your room becomes the venue. So depending on your room, you know, like it's like your nightclub. And if you see it at a big theater, you can really appreciate it, particularly when Venus and Furs comes on and some of the songs towards the middle of the film. The acoustic environment really envelops you in a way that hopefully simulates seeing them in the first place.
You mentioned Afonso and Adam, the two co-editors on the movie, and I was wondering if you could speak to what was the process of developing the sound with them as editors. What was that collaboration like?
The collaboration was mainly with Afonso because Adam was on to something else, but well, they both were. I mean, because this took years to make. They were cutting it for years, and you know, they would do their as every editor does. They would add their sounds. So I always feel like I'm collaborating in that way, where I see what the editors started out intending to do, and then I try and do it better or do it differently, hopefully, to respect that collaboration. But at the very end, when we were doing the so-called final mix, I say so-called because it wasn't like a normal mix. Todd was in Portland, and I was in Sag Harbor on Long Island. And Fonz was in Portland with Todd. And so Fonz was actually kind of became a sort of a mixer, because he was the guy with Todd who, you know, was running the machinery and interpreting what, you know, Todd wanted and sending it back to me and having it back and forth. It was a very unusual way of working, but like everything in film, you know, you do it for the first time each time, and it was in the end it was delightful. So Fonz, you know, he really knows sound really well, as does Adam, and I think what they put into their temp tracks is what inspired me to, you know, in our collaboration.
So I was curious, did you employ any techniques with the sound design in order to heighten the narrative that was being displayed in certain scenes of the documentary?
Yeah, I did add sounds in many places. You know, some of them were goofy cartoon sounds, and some of them were abstract sounds. In the big scene with the multi-panel split screen that evolves as Jonas Mekas is talking about how all the arts were collaborating. That's where I tried to take stuff, period stuff like space broadcast from rocket launches for NASA, and speeches by dictators, and cars, just like little random bits, just like the screen was. Just take found sounds that were from the period and blend them together. So that was very exciting. But we used cartoon sounds in many different places, and one of the sounds that I really enjoyed trying to find was in the very beginning in the I've Got a Secret sequence. They have little flash cuts, and I wanted to put a sound that represented the flash cuts. And back in the day when they shot on film, every time the camera turned off, it would have speed up like that, and it was a very little quick sound. So I looked through I remembered it, and I looked through a lot of different YouTube videos, and finally I found some demonstration of an old 60mm sound on film camera, and it was perfect. I put it in, and Todd loved it. But each sound was a challenge. You had to sort of start from zero and figure out what should be there and what shouldn't be there.
Well, Leslie, thank you so much for joining us. We wish you all the best. And to all of our viewers, please like this video, smash that subscribe button, and don't forget to go to goldderby.com and use the Gold Derby app to make your predictions and see if you can outsmart the top prognosticators in Hollywood. Thanks so much, Leslie.
You're welcome. Thank you.